This is Robert Roethemeyer, Director of Library and Information Services here at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is the second of 3 segments we're shooting to bring you up to date on the library expansion project. Yesterday we took some footage and words from across the lake with a panorama of the whole silhouette. This morning, though, we're beginning on the bridge that connects the historic Kramer Chapel Plaza with the new library plaza. As we stand on this bridge, we are at the same elevation as the plaza of the historic campus, the main floor of the library to the left of us as we walk across the bridge, and ultimately of the library extended plaza. As we move beyond the face of the existing library into the gap between the 2 buildings, we have a wonderful vista of the 2-story connector moving from the main floor of the present library into the First Lantern building, and also the ramp rolling from the lower level of the existing library down into the lower level of the library expansion. This bridge will be the main corridor as students leave the chapel plaza and the classrooms and make their way into the First Lantern building to go down into the library, and as individuals attending retreats in the classroom space in the First Lantern make their way from there across this bridge and up the ramp into Kramer Chapel. We're in the First Lantern building, the one closest to the historic library. The building for the moment has been placed under a temporary cover so that the steel beams all around us can have intumescent painting applied. Intumescent painting adheres to the steel in a very smooth way and gives a 1-hour fire protection barrier. Within this space behind me, we can see the wall that was encased in rough red brick and then painted white to reflect the architecture we have throughout campus. This double set of walls will collect the eastern sunlight coming into the building and drive it down the main stairwell, which is straight through the historic building from the current existing entryway across a bridge that'll be glass on both sides and leading to this spot. Also at this spot, we see the cavity for the elevator shaft that will lead patrons from this level down to the lower level of the building, or patrons arriving at the lower level handicap parking just outside the building up to the plaza level, where they'll be able to move about to the library, historic library, to the commons, to the dining hall, to the chapel, all at one elevation. We're standing atop the plaza between the 2 lantern buildings in a space that eventually will be covered with a live roof. That live roof will gather water for the plants that are there, and that water will pass through and finally make its way to the drains that are below me. The drains go down through the building, under the building, and out to the St. Joseph River behind campus, all draining away by gravity. As we prepare for an eventual plaza up here with a living roof and paver squares, we will need to build up some layers. And the first layer to go on top of this concrete pad will be an insulation layer made up of the blue foam that we see stacked over here. The blue foam layers will be constructed in layers to create valleys, which will drive the water in various zones up here to the roof drains. Atop the blue foam board will be a substance called TPO. It's a rubberized layer that will be laid over the whole roof, adhered to the concrete curbs around the lantern buildings and to the concrete curbs at the edge of the building, providing that water repellent shield atop the foam board, over which the water passes through the green things and ultimately down these drains. We're atop the plaza level of the library expansion on the eastern face of the South Lantern. The South Lantern has its structure exposed to us behind me. During the month of August and early September, we had the structural steel go into place, and then the wood purlins were placed perpendicularly across the tubular steel structure, and then the lasagna began, a series of layers building up the roof structure. And one of the major pieces of that is the SIPS panel, which really is a plywood sandwich with 6 inches of insulation in between. Once that was in place, plywood was placed across those joints to pull it together into a solid whole, and then a vinyl sheeting was put down with some weather resistance inherent in it. So atop the roofs, we now await the arrival of the custom Concordia Ludovici clay tiles to form the roof itself. As one looks through behind me at the structure, one sees the vista that we will have outside of this lantern, which will serve as the great reading room, a very quiet space within the library expansion. As we come to the close of this segment, we've made the journey across the bridge from the Chapel Plaza to the Library Plaza. We've seen the interior of the first lantern building. We've seen the space out in between the lantern buildings. We've been into the second lantern building, and now we stand at the very south end of this project. Those of you who have been following this project since we had the architectural fly-through some 3 years ago will recall the very end of that fly-through when we stepped out of the second lantern building and had presented before us a vision of exactly what we've experienced this morning with the chapel in the backdrop. As we move toward the third in the 3 segments that we're shooting for you, we'll take ourselves to the lower level of this plaza that we're standing on, to the lake level library extension.